The most dangerous moment is not when a narcissist becomes angry. It is when they finally realize that you are never coming back. Because in that moment, they often do not react the way most people expect. They do not always beg. They do not always plead. They do not always explode in rage. Instead, they frequently do something far more calculated, and very few people truly talk about it. When a narcissist reaches the point where they genuinely understand that you will never return, the first and most destabilizing experience for them is the permanent loss of control. This is not about losing a relationship in the way a healthy individual understands loss. For a narcissist, control is the relationship. It is the system through which they regulate their emotions, maintain their self-image, and protect themselves from deep feelings of inadequacy, insecurity, or emptiness. As long as there is even the slightest possibility that you might come back, respond, argue, explain yourself, or react emotionally, they still feel they possess a degree of leverage. The awareness that you are permanently gone removes that leverage completely. This realization creates a profound psychological threat that can be extremely difficult for them to tolerate. Narcissistic functioning often relies upon the belief that they can influence how other people feel, think, and respond to them. When you stop reacting, stop engaging, and stop revolving around their emotional gravity, it signals that they no longer have access to your inner world. This is deeply unsettling because it confronts them with something they work tirelessly to avoid: powerlessness. Healthy people can tolerate powerlessness as a natural part of life. They may dislike it, but they can accept it. Narcissists often struggle to do the same. For them, powerlessness can trigger intense shame, vulnerability, insecurity, and a feeling of internal collapse. The loss of control also fractures the illusion of superiority that they have worked hard to maintain. If you are capable of walking away and staying away, it challenges the story they tell themselves that they are indispensable, exceptional, or impossible to replace. Your absence becomes evidence that their influence was never as absolute as they believed it to be. Rather than processing this realization in a healthy way, they frequently defend against it. They may minimize your importance, devalue your contributions, or convince themselves that they were the one who chose to disengage. These distortions are not always conscious lies in the traditional sense. More often, they function as psychological survival mechanisms designed to protect a fragile self-image. What makes this stage particularly intense is that there is no external solution available to them. They cannot argue you back into the relationship. They cannot charm you back into their orbit. They cannot provoke you back into emotional engagement. Without access to you, they are left alone with an internal state that feels increasingly difficult to regulate. This is why the final loss of control frequently leads to increased rigidity, emotional detachment, covert resentment, or subtle hostility. It is the mind's attempt to restore a sense of dominance where none currently exists. The more permanent your absence becomes, the more they are forced to confront a reality they cannot easily manipulate. When a narcissist realizes that you are truly gone for good, direct engagement often becomes too risky from their perspective. As a result, they may shift into a pattern that can best be described as silent surveillance. This is not curiosity in the healthy sense. It is not necessarily longing either. It is monitoring behavior driven by anxiety, entitlement, and a desire to regain psychological control without exposing themselves to the possibility of rejection. Contacting you directly would require acknowledging your autonomy, and autonomy is often what threatens them most. Observing from a distance allows them to feel informed without becoming vulnerable. It enables them to gather information while protecting their ego from the possibility of being ignored. This surveillance can take many different forms. They may check your social media accounts repeatedly. They may pay close attention to who interacts with your content. They may gather information through mutual friends, relatives, or acquaintances. Sometimes the behavior is subtle and difficult to detect. Other times it becomes persistent and relentless. What matters most is the motive behind the behavior. They are often tracking whether you are suffering, struggling, stagnant, or thriving. If you appear emotionally stable, fulfilled, or genuinely happy, it can be profoundly destabilizing for them. Your ability to function well without them contradicts the narrative that you needed them in order to survive or succeed. That contradiction creates cognitive dissonance that they find extremely uncomfortable. At the same time, they may be searching for openings. Silent surveillance allows them to scan for moments of vulnerability, loneliness, uncertainty, or transition. A breakup, a career setback, a personal loss, or even an emotional social media post can sometimes be interpreted as an opportunity. This helps explain why contact may occur long after the relationship has ended, often at the exact moment you believe they have disappeared permanently. In their mind, time does not necessarily represent closure. Instead, time can represent opportunity. Distance provides plausible deniability while protecting their self-image if they decide to reappear. There is often a punitive aspect to this behavior as well. By refusing to engage openly, they attempt to reverse the power dynamic. Silence becomes a tool used to suggest that you are insignificant, while secretly ensuring that you remain psychologically present in their mind. They want to know they still occupy some space in your awareness, even if they are no longer visible in your daily life. This is not true absence. It is control exercised through invisibility. What makes silent surveillance particularly unsettling is that it is frequently fueled by entitlement. They may believe they have a right to information about you because you once fulfilled a psychological function in their life. Even after you leave, that sense of ownership may not disappear. Watching from a distance allows them to avoid accountability while maintaining the illusion that they remain connected, relevant, and somehow positioned above rather than outside your life. The connection exists primarily in their mind, but they continue to invest energy into preserving it. When a narcissist becomes convinced that you are never returning, they often shift into what could be called image repair mode. This is not typically about self-awareness, growth, or genuine reflection. Instead, it is a strategic response to the threat their ego has experienced. Your permanent departure creates a rupture in the story they tell themselves and others about who they are. For a narcissist, being perceived as rejected, abandoned, or left behind can feel intolerable. It suggests deficiency. And deficiency is something they often cannot psychologically integrate into their self-concept. Rather than processing the loss internally, they frequently turn their attention outward and begin managing perception. They become increasingly concerned with how the situation appears rather than what it actually means. The focus shifts from emotional truth to narrative control. Conversations may be subtly edited, important details may be omitted, events may be reframed, facts may be distorted. You may be recast as unstable, ungrateful, overly emotional, difficult to please, or impossible to satisfy. This is not always done with obvious hostility or aggression. In many cases, it is delivered calmly, confidently, and convincingly because they genuinely believe the version of events they are presenting at that moment. The objective is not to understand reality. The objective is to eliminate any version of the story in which they are responsible for the breakdown of the relationship. Accepting responsibility would require confronting shame, and shame can feel psychologically devastating to them. As a result, accountability is often replaced with justification, blame shifting, or narrative reconstruction. These defenses allow them to protect their self-image while avoiding painful self-examination. Image repair serves another important function as well. It reassures them that they still possess social influence. By controlling the narrative, they attempt to influence the emotional reactions of other people. Sympathy, validation, support, and allegiance from friends, relatives, or colleagues become substitutes for the emotional regulation you once provided. Every expression of agreement reinforces their belief that they are justified, misunderstood, mistreated, or even victimized. This external validation becomes a temporary structure supporting a fragile sense of self. The more threatened they feel internally, the more intensely they may seek reassurance from external sources. One of the most important things to understand is that this behavior often intensifies when you remain silent. Your refusal to defend yourself, explain your position, or correct every distortion removes their opportunity for direct conflict. Without your participation, they are free to construct a one-sided version of reality. This can feel incredibly unfair, especially when you know the truth of what happened. It can be painful to watch others accept a narrative that does not accurately reflect your experience. Yet, from the narcissist's perspective, your silence is often interpreted very differently. Rather than viewing it as dignity, maturity, or emotional restraint, they may interpret it as permission. The absence of contradiction allows them to expand the story in whatever direction best protects their self-image. The less resistance they encounter, the more confident they may become in the narrative they have created. What many people fail to realize is that this entire process is not evidence of strength. It is evidence of fragility, hidden beneath layers of control, image management, and psychological defense. The more permanent your departure becomes, the more they are forced to confront realities they have spent years avoiding. That is why the moment a narcissist truly understands you are never coming back can become one of the most psychologically destabilizing experiences they face. It is not simply the loss of a person. It is the loss of influence, the loss of certainty, the loss of control, and the loss of a reflection that once helped maintain the identity they worked so hard to protect. And while they may never openly admit the impact of that loss, their behaviors often reveal a struggle taking place beneath the surface. The surveillance, the image repair, the narrative management, the subtle attempts to regain relevance, and the refusal to accept accountability all point toward the same reality. Your decision to leave permanently represents something they cannot easily control, redefine, or erase. For someone whose sense of stability depends upon maintaining influence over others, that reality can feel far more threatening than anger, conflict, or even rejection. It confronts them with the one thing they have spent a lifetime trying to avoid: the realization that another person can choose freedom, maintain it, and continue thriving beyond their reach. This phase frequently includes performative happiness, exaggerated achievements, or sudden displays of moral superiority. These behaviors are not genuine signs of peace or healing. They function more like visual props designed to communicate that they are thriving without you, that your absence had little effect on them, and that nothing valuable was truly lost. In reality, these displays often exist to protect a fragile internal structure that has already been shaken and destabilized. The more threatened they feel beneath the surface, the more determined they may become to project strength, success, and indifference to the outside world. When a narcissist understands that you are never coming back, immediate attempts to pull you back into their orbit often decrease or stop altogether. This is not because they have accepted the loss. Rather, timing becomes critically important. This is where delayed hoovering frequently begins to emerge. The delay is rarely accidental. Reaching out too quickly creates the risk of rejection, and rejection would confirm the very loss of control they are trying to avoid. Waiting allows them to regain a sense of psychological advantage and emotional distance from the original wound. In their mind, time serves a strategic purpose. They believe distance weakens your defenses, not because you forget what happened, but because they assume that emotional boundaries naturally soften with time. Delayed hoovering is rooted more in entitlement than in genuine attachment. They do not experience the ending of relationships in the same way emotionally healthy individuals do. To them, relationships are often viewed less as completed chapters and more as resources stored away for potential future use. Even years later, they may feel entirely justified in reappearing. This is because they never processed the relationship as a mutual bond with a definitive ending. Instead, they often processed it as an extension of themselves that stopped functioning the way they wanted. The delay helps preserve the fantasy that access can eventually be restored once circumstances become favorable. They convince themselves that enough time has passed for old conflicts to lose their significance. These attempts frequently arrive in quiet and indirect forms. It may be a neutral message, a nostalgic memory, a sudden apology lacking true accountability, or even a manufactured crisis designed to trigger your empathy. The tone is often softer than it once was because aggression did not achieve the desired outcome. What they are testing is not reconciliation. What they are measuring is responsiveness. A response, even a brief or polite one, signals that the door may not be completely closed. That signal matters far more than the actual content of the conversation. The simple fact that you replied can become evidence that access still exists. To them, the emotional opening is often more important than the words being exchanged. Delayed hoovering also provides an opportunity for them to rewrite history internally. Given enough time, they may convince themselves that the conflict was mutual, exaggerated, misunderstood, or resolved simply because years have passed. This mental revision lowers the risk of shame when they decide to reach out again. In their revised narrative, they are no longer someone who caused harm. They become someone checking in, offering closure, extending kindness, or reconnecting for positive reasons. This reframing protects their ego while simultaneously positioning you as the person who must decide how mature, forgiving, understanding, or compassionate to be. The responsibility subtly shifts away from them and onto you. What makes delayed hoovering particularly destabilizing is that it often occurs precisely when you are doing well. Stability, growth, emotional healing, or genuine detachment can register as challenges to their significance. The outreach is not necessarily evidence that they miss you. More often, it reflects discomfort with no longer occupying a meaningful place in your inner world. The timing is rarely random. It frequently coincides with moments when your independence appears solidified and your emotional recovery has become visible. At that stage, the attempt becomes less about rebuilding a relationship and more about reasserting relevance within a dynamic they believe should never fully end. The goal is often not connection, but confirmation that they still matter in some way. When a narcissist recognizes that you are never coming back, rewriting history becomes a psychological necessity rather than a simple choice. The reality of the relationship threatens the image they hold of themselves. As a result, the past must be reshaped into something they can emotionally tolerate. They struggle to maintain a narrative in which they caused significant harm, while simultaneously viewing themselves as competent, superior, justified, or innocent. Accepting the complete truth would require accountability, and accountability activates shame. For a narcissist, shame is not merely uncomfortable. It can feel psychologically devastating. To protect themselves from that experience, memory itself becomes flexible and selective. This rewriting process often unfolds quietly over time. Events become minimized, altered, reframed, or stripped of their emotional significance. Moments when you expressed genuine pain may later be remembered as overreactions. Boundaries you established to protect yourself may be recalled as betrayals or unfair attacks. Manipulative, dismissive, or abusive behaviors are often reinterpreted as reasonable reactions to your supposed shortcomings. As the years pass, this altered version of events may become the only version they can comfortably access. This does not necessarily mean they are consciously lying every moment. Rather, their mind edits reality in ways that preserve psychological survival. The distortion serves a defensive function, shielding them from feelings they cannot comfortably face. What makes this process especially confusing for those who experience the relationship is the confidence with which the narcissist often presents this revised story. They speak with certainty and conviction. They may even display a sense of moral clarity about what supposedly happened. This certainty can create self-doubt in others, particularly if those individuals were conditioned over time to question their own perceptions and experiences. The rewritten history is not merely a private defense mechanism. It becomes a tool. It is used to justify behavior, gather sympathy, recruit validation, and position themselves as misunderstood, mistreated, or wronged. The narrative becomes a shield that protects them from accountability while strengthening their public image.